Well, hello there. I'm up here in the loft and I'm cracking on with some important work on well, it's all important, isn't it? But cracking on with some work on the loft layout, weir yard. And I've got two areas that I want to really motor on this time round. One of them is the turntable, and also I'm going to start to look at some of the terrain on the other end of the layout, some of the hillsides, and I want to try out a new technique. So stay with me, watch with me, it'd be good to have your company, and you can see just how well I do. Anyway, let's take a look. Welcome back to Weir Yard here up in my loft, and I thought I'd share with you today one of the new things that I've got, and this is the Peacoat Turntable Kit. And you can see here got a catalogue number LK55, and this is the OO/HO kit, and it loosely represents, I think it's a 76-foot turntable, so the real one would be approximately 76 feet long, I believe. So you can see here it shows it all made up, but what you actually get in the box is the various bits and pieces. Now the base, you can see here, you're thinking, oh, some kind of cheesecake base. It isn't. It comes as 3 pieces, which I've already glued together, and this is going to be the turntable well. I am going to paint this up, so this is just the bare plastic it comes in. But this is the area where I'm going to be fitting it in. If I just move that out of the way, you can see there that we've still got the construction lines on the board from just basically marking, so I knew where to put screws through to the structure that's underneath. Now, this would fit perfectly into there, not a problem, if it wasn't for the fact that I had to strengthen the board. And that screw there is the giveaway that there is another cross member that's been added there. So if I place this, giving myself a little bit of space, because that cross member is going to stick out either side of that line a little bit, you can see on this side that that's underneath the well. So what I'm going to have to do is actually cut away that cross member. I will put a new piece over here, just across, to strengthen that, to stop any sag. It's not a problem, but just got to bear that in mind. Everything else, it looks pretty good. I'm going to need a hole that's, I think it's pretty much 12 inches in diameter. So I'm going to find my old school compass and I will draw that out so I know where to cut. And what I'm going to do is just basically avoid this cross member and this cross member, because they are majorly structural, and then I will have to cut out that one there, do a few bits and pieces, but it's going to go in just fine. And then the first things first, I probably need to make all of this. Now the kit itself isn't motorised, but you can see here that it is intended that you can motorise it if you choose to, using Meccano. I did see it in the instructions somewhere that the central boss of this kit is a push fit for a Meccano axle. So I do still have some Meccano brass gears and axles, things like that. So I'm going to have it so that this turntable can be operated by a long cranked handle that will sit on the end here, and you'll turn that and it will slowly rotate the turntable. That's how I plan to do it. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to crack on and build the kit, and then I'm going to cut out in the baseboard. Now I can't do that tonight because it's actually about 11 o'clock at night and I don't want to be disturbing the neighbours, but that's going to be a job for Sunday for me. So I've got the turntable built, and I've actually painted it as well. So this is a little bit different from how you'll see it straight out of the box once you built it, which is there on the box. So I'm really pleased so far actually. This LK55 turntable kit, it goes together so well and builds up into quite a strong kit. There's a lot of thought gone into this, so I can very much recommend this product. And as you can see, with a little bit of a lick of paint, it comes up quite nicely. Now I've used Humbrol number 28, I think it is, which is sort of a matte off-white for the railings. I've used Humbrol 91, which again is like a matte drab olive green for the metalwork down there at the bottom. And then I've used Humbrol matte again, number 110, number 110 for the wooden deck. And I find in model form, gloss colours don't really seem to ever work. So I always tend to stick with either matte or at a pinch satin if you want a slightly more glossy finish. Steer clear of those gloss paints. They just really don't look good, in my opinion, in model form. Now, I've still got to paint the turntable well, and the colour I've picked for the bottom is number 83, which is a sort of a weird concretey colour. And I've then also got to decide what I'm doing with these upright walls. They're actually quite smooth at the moment. There's no brick relief or anything, so I'm either going to paint them as if they're concrete, or I'm going to figure out a way of putting a brick relief onto there, which might actually work better. But I've got a little bit of time to think up what to do with that. Now, the reason it's propped at a weird angle is because on the underside we've got these electrical prongs sticking down, so it can't sit flat at the moment. It actually does need its cutout, which I need to mark out now and cut into the board. That's going to be the next job. And because you've got to be ever so careful where the cross members go, and you can see just there, that is going to be an issue. So I'm going to have to remove that and move it around a little bit somehow. It's not too much of a problem. These other two cross members are going to be absolutely fine, but that's going to be the next job, so I'm going to crack on with that. I've marked out and cut the hole, so you can see there the cross member I had to cut through. So there's two bits there. I'm going to add another piece of cross just over here. It'll just strengthen all of that. I need to screw this little bit down as well. But test fit of the turntable. So here it is. And should just slot in, which it does, which is great. So finally got the turntable in position. So now it's on two. I'm going to strengthen the baseboard first whilst I've got good access underneath, and then I'll glue this in, and I think a bit of final painting work, and start work on then lining up. There's going to be a few tracks off it over here, and then I have to think where the main tracks come off over here. Now, space is at a premium, which you might scoff at that with a layout this size, but quite often things like turntables do need a lot of space. So it's one of those things that even with a lot of space like I've got up here, you still might have to be quite creative in fitting everything that you want in. So I'm going to get on now, do a little bit more work here, and I'll come back to you when I've got something new to show you. And glued in with a bit of PVA, just run around the edges there, so that will eventually set and hold it in place. And it's looking pretty good, actually, even if I say so myself. I'm just going to slowly take that out. And what I want to show you here is the central boss with the electrical connections. What you've got to try and do is, there's obviously a dead spot where the polarity changes. And the easiest way of doing this is making sure that the polarity change happens at a point where you're not going to have any tracks off the turntable. So I'm actually going to just spin this ever so slightly until they are left to right horizontal, because the way that they match up on the underside of this is you've got those two pins. So effectively that's going to change polarity in that area. So that's going to mean that we're not going to be trying to line up with any tracks when it does so. So just a little pointer there for you. I've also not glued on the boss underneath the actual girder part of the turntable, and the reason for this is so, as you can see there, being able to just remove it, which until all of the base there is painted and some of the electrical stuff is done, I do want to be able to remove this for access. So that will come eventually, but I'm going to crack on now, and I want to get all of this inside here painted. And the colour I'm going to use, the colour I've chosen, is Humbrol number 83. And I think that that would be a reasonable good colour to do all of this, and then pick out the rail with a rust colour. These grills, again, dark colour with rust. I've got some washes, some coloured washes, and I'm going to try and pick out some detail, and then possibly even cut some brick paper to glue on around the outside there, just to give it a brick finish effect. So I'm going to get on and see where I get up to. Right, well, I'm back here now. I've painted up the top of the turntable. Still needs some final weathering. You're going to look at that and think, ugh, you made a right mess of that Humbrol number 83. I think, to be honest, it needs a second coat. It's supposed to dry completely matte. I have used this paint before, but this is a slightly older tin, and Humbrol went through a period where there was some quality control issues. Now, it was an unopened tin, but one that was bought about 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm wondering, is it from the quality control period where there were some issues? I'll sort it out, don't you worry about that. But we've got posed on the turntable Duchess of Montrose, and I've also got these 3 approach tracks on this side, all in position. Ballasting is down. The ballast is wet at the moment, so it just starts to give a sense of what this area is going to ultimately start to look like. So just going to leave it all to dry now, and then I'll come back, second coat on the turntable inside of the well there with the Humbrol number 83. It is a bit yellow actually. It looks a bit like deck bleached teak, and you're probably going to tell me that that's what Humbrol number 83 actually is. Now, I have used it before for some southern style concrete fencing, and it looked fine, but that was a different tin. So I may actually change the colour for the second coat, lighten that up, sort of a light grey. I'll have a look around, see what I've got, but that will improve that. The rest of it, well, the white railings do pick it out quite nicely. So that's where we're up to. Well, I've been doing some work here, and this is a recommendation that came in from one of the viewers of this channel to use J-cloths mixed with a PVA and water mix, which is, I thought I'd give this a go. I've put underneath some scrunched up paper and some of the spare Jablite offcuts, and just going to let that dry. Then it'll get a coat of filler, and we'll see how it goes. So looking forward to seeing the end results of this. And it's actually fairly economical in terms of both glue and J-cloths. They soak it up really well, much better than paper would. So really looking forward to how this turns out. I've done all this area in the suggested method. It's still drying there, and I'm going to take a go at this corner. So what you see there is the core, as it were. I've used Jablite to build up some layers, and then I've also used some scrap packing paper just to fill out some of the areas. That's not even glued on. What I envisage is that the weight and damp glue mix will percolate through all that and just sort it out. That's what I'm hoping on. So what I've actually got down here is, it looks brown because the paintbrush was slightly dirty from having painted some brown. It doesn't really matter. It was approximately a 50-50 mix of PVA and water, and I'm just sort of mixing that up, and you get this, it's almost like a slimy mix. And then in turn, I've prepared some of the J-cloths. I've cut some bits into quarters and a couple into halves, because what you'll find is a full J-cloth is quite big, and yes, I will use some full J-cloths, but it's always useful to have these smaller bits to fill in around, and you just dip them in there, swoosh them around, make sure they're well soaked with the glue mix, and then just lay it out almost like it's papier-mâché or plaster cloth. It'd be a similar method over the top of all that, and just let it then soak through, dry. And what I'm going to do then is a layer of filler, very watery filler over the top, let that dry, and then paint and build up in the usual way. And this is a method that was suggested to me by one of you. So I would name check you if you can remember exactly who it is. I'm sure they'll let me know in the comments. But I'm hoping that this method works. So far it does seem to have worked out okay. It's just a case of when it dries, will it dry solid enough to be structural? They said that it dries a bit like armour plating, so let's see. I mean, these J-cloths are better than papier-mâché because there's a lot more strength to them. When they get wet, they don't tear apart. And they are also pretty cheap. These are own brand from the local corner shop. So you get a lot in a packet, and they do seem to go quite far because they don't tear. So I'm going to crack on with this. It's such a messy job, there's just no way I can film it. I have to just get going and get it all done, because once you get the glue on your hands, you really don't want to be touching stuff like phones. So let's get to it. Well, this is the end effect. You can see the J-cloths in there, but they're soaking wet at the moment, obviously, because I've just laid them. But you can get that sense of the landscape mass in there. The little flecks of white are just bits of polystyrene or whatever that's got caught up in them. It's not a problem. It'll all disappear under paint and plaster and stuff. But I'm actually quite pleased with that. I finally got a sense of it being landscape rather than polystyrene. So really happy with that, as long as it's strong when it dries. And I've also got over here, tunnel portals are glued and screwed in position. These are the lower level. There'll be another tunnel portal on the higher level that you're starting to see taking shape, well, the frame of it taking shape. But you also, I'm finding, I'm starting to get a sense of how the landscape is really going to look. Obviously not impressive from this angle, but the idea is that this hillside is going to go right up to fill this corner, and I'm going to have the 3 main lines on the bottom level running through, and that's actually 2 tunnel mouths back to back there, Hornby Scaledale, and then above them there's going to be a very short tunnel through part of the mountain. So I think it's going to look quite good, with 4 tracks heading through the mountain on 2 different levels. And then I can finally start to, I've got to extend the baseboards here out over the ramp, so that the incline down will be in part over the top of this to kind of swing in around here. And I'm going to fit it all together. It's going to be great. I say that. I keep saying to people, it's like, don't worry, it'll all come together. And that's really my approach to a great many things. Railway modelling is just one of those things. But I think I'm going to call it a night now, because I have done an awful lot, and a lot of the messy stuff is done, at least in part. And what it will mean is that I can now start to ballast some of this track. I can do some of this scenery. I get trees up there, and this will really start to look good, and get a sense of a 3-dimensional landscape with the railway inside the landscape. So yeah, I've got a bridge to build across there, a big skew girder bridge. That little space at the back there needs some work to kind of fill it with rocks and stuff. And then I've got some retaining walls that are currently in the shed, on the shed layout, Bolton Trinity Road. They're going to make a comeback along here as a nice long retaining wall that will just hold back the upper level, and then a little bit of an embankment there. It is going to be good. I'm really looking forward to building this area. I think I'm going to end up with quite an epic cutting, with the tunnel feeling like, not that the railway's making a beeline for the nearest hill in an otherwise flat terrain, but that the railway has to tunnel through this hill that's already there, you know, a sense of grandioseness to the landscape. Well, the hillside is finally pretty much dry, and it's a little bit of flexibility going on, but it's certainly gone a bit crunchier. I don't know whether I didn't use quite enough PVA or not, but it's certainly, to be honest, I'm quite pleased with it. And what I'm going to do now is I've started mixing up some polyfiller with water, and I've added in some brown concentrated artistic paint, and that's really just so that it's got a more earthy colour to it, although actually that looks more like chocolate mousse. But as mixed up, the polyfiller is brilliant white, and it does show through if you miss any bits with the top coat or if you drill into it. So the idea behind this is just really trying to get it a little bit more muted colours. I did actually put quite a lot of the brown paint in, but it seems that it takes an awful lot to overcome the white of the polyfiller. So you can see here, I've mixed it up, and it's kind of like thick whipped cream. And what I'm going to do now is kind of paint this over the top of the J cloth, let that dry. That'll add yet more strength to it and give me the base colour, over which I'll paint and start doing the grass. Talking of grass, over here you can see an area that was previously done with the plaster and the shaper sheet, and I've started putting the grass layer on. That took all of maybe 5 minutes work to turn that from bare white plaster to what you see there. And there's going to be some trees and bushes going to be added in, but certainly as a base to set off from, that's pretty good going. And there's no static grass going on here. I haven't actually got to grips with that puffer bottle, not tried it yet, but I might try adding static grass over the top. Now with this, I just paint on the brown paint, and whilst it's still wet, I sprinkle in the base colour of the grass. They're about 2mm fibres. Smoosh it around into the paint with your finger where needs be. And then when you're happy with that, I blast over with the hairspray, and then go back over with Summer Flower Mix from Peacoat. And that just gives a little bit of variety of colour and a suggestion of flowers, although not really getting a lot of flowers going on in there. So you can build these layers up. It's not really a problem, but certainly we're getting there. So I'm going to get on now with the area over there. I'm going to see where I get to. And the final effect looks remarkably like a big pile of chocolate mousse. I've done all of this down here, and I had a little bit left over, so I've put a big splat in the middle there. And the idea behind that is that'll just add a little bit of a three-dimensional feel to that part of the area when it gets grassed, rather than it just being flat. I'm a little out of breath because I just run up and down the stairs, but just got to let this dry. According to the polyfiller, it should be dry in 60 minutes, but I'll give it a bit longer than that just to make sure it's fully hard. In the meantime, I think next job will be to do a bit of work on that bridge along the back there and ballasting the track, get some of this track ballasted. So that's where I'm up to. Sorry, I'm really out of breath. But it does look a bit like a lunar landscape, but that should dry out nicely. You can see that the paint concentrate I've put in gives it that slightly browner texture, and really that's just when it gets chipped you don't end up with what looks like chalk coming out of the ground. That's the idea anyway. We'll see whether it works. And I'm looking forward to getting quite a few trees up there on that hillside. I'm going to make quite a feature of it. But the main feature is still to come, still to be built over here. Starting to look good, it's drying out, and what I've started work on now is the mountain area. I've just started calling it the mountain. It looks a bit weird at the moment because what you're seeing is a little bit of a skeleton, but also all the tunnel mouths with no actual tunnels in between. But you can see there I'm test fitting the tunnel portal on the upper level there. And I've got some of these Woodland Scenics Ready rocks, and I've just test fitted a piece there just to kind of fill that gap and obscure the fact that it's actually a double track portal with a single track line. That piece of track is fixed down, all this woodwork is fixed in, and I've also positioned in the tunnel portals on this side. Now I tested with that portal over there where I could put the portal, and actually it's not going to work with the double track portal that I've got out in the shed for recycling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy another single track portal like down there, and I think that will work a lot better up there. See, I can get away with that at the back because you're not really going to see it because of the angles. But at the front, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and get a narrower tunnel portal, I think, for it to look right. And then the whole mountain above is going to be built up. And I've salvaged a whole load of bits of jablite, and this is going to form the basis of what I'm going to use. Now, I've put in a few upright pieces glued in, waiting for that glue to set. And the idea behind this is I don't want to build a solid lump of jablite because it's just really expensive and unnecessary. So these will act like ribs, and then I will use pieces glued on at an angle, just covering that up, and just build up this mountain structure right up into the corner. I want a really big structure to give this sense of height. This piece of wood at the front's got to be painted brown. And I'm just really making it up a little bit as I go along, and I think it's going to look all right. You can see the sense of scale with that train in there. But then I also need to sort out this bridge. I'm going to use a piece of thin plywood for the actual base. And then I've got the Will's Vary Girder kit. I've built up one kit, and it just makes a girder long enough for one side, so I need another kit in there. But it's coming along. And if I turn around now, I've got all the grass in this area. The turntable's coming along nicely. And what I've discovered is a little bit of a boo-boo here. But over there, that track needs to be ballasted. But getting over there, now that all of this is here, it's actually quite a stretch. And heading further on, getting right back into that corner is going to be really difficult. So I'm going to have a really good think about what on earth I'm going to do over there. So rather than continuing at the front here, what I'm going to do is actually try and get all the tracks at the back done, the embankment done as well. And then I'm going to have the same problem over in that corner. So I'm not going to do anything here until that corner is sorted out. I think that would be prudent at this point. And then I want to ballast tracks, do the cutting sides all the way along there. And then I've also got this piece of structure to do. But it's actually going to come along quite quickly, I think. So I'm going to call it a night now. So in the next video, you'll be able to see how I got on. But I think you'll agree that progress has been really quite incredible. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been really good having you along here for the journey. And I hope following this has given you some inspiration for your own layout building, because that's what it's all about. And it's been fairly quick and easy, so it just goes to show that if a Wally like me can do all this, then anybody can. So don't knock yourself down. You too can build an amazing model railway like this, fairly cheaply as well. A lot of this is either scrap material or fairly cheap material that I've been trying to source to do this. So you take really good care of yourself. Until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony, Michael Churchwood, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, and Offshore Alan. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knob T. Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.